adult finalists in this year's Association for Mormon Letters Awards. We'll have an awards ceremony this Saturday evening. You can check the complete conference program for the time and information about that. Andrew Hall will be the master of ceremonies tonight. I'll go ahead and turn the time over to Andrew. Thanks.
Thanks, James. Okay, so we just show what we're going to be reading today, or the awards that we're talking about. 2 awards mostly tonight. The middle grade novel finalists are these 5, and then the young adult novel finalists are these 5. And we're also very pleased to have one of the short fiction finalists, Ryan Shoemaker, joining us as well. The other authors did their readings a couple of days ago, but Ryan couldn't be there for that day, so he's going to join us and add a little adult short fiction spice to this discussion. Thanks, Ryan. And here's the order. So we'll start with Sarah, who's on the East Coast and is having storms, so hopefully her internet will work the whole time. And then we'll go with Jenny, and we'll go from there. And I'm excited to have everybody here and see you all. This is the Whitney Awards were just awarded a couple of weeks ago, and we have a lot of overlap with them. Our adult novelists don't have as much overlap, it seems like, with the adult Whitney Awards, at least not in recent years. But the middle grade and the young adult do. So it's interesting to have these kind of 2 different takes, 2 different looks at how. Anyways, 2 different chances to win an award. That's what it is. Okay, so let's start off with Sarah, and I'll introduce you, Sarah. Sarah's reading from her middle grade novel, What Stars Are Made Of. Sarah is a poet and author of books for young readers. Her first novel, this is her first novel, and was an ALA Notable Book of 2020, and won 2 Whitney Awards for middle grade and for Novel of the Year Youth Fiction. Her March 2021 novel, Breathing Underwater, is a Junior Library Guild selection. Sarah is a poetry MFA candidate and graduate instructor at the University of South Florida, Tampa. Sarah, go ahead.
Wonderful. Thank you guys so much for having me. This is a wonderful, wonderful honor. As was said, I'm going to be reading quickly from What Stars Are Made Of that came out last year. And this is a book about a young girl with a genetic disorder called Turner syndrome that makes a deal with the universe to help her big sister's unborn baby be born safely and healthily and happily into the world. So I'm going to be reading a short selection from towards the beginning, not exactly the beginning. This is, I tend to gravitate towards this chapter when I do reading because and it actually originally was the first chapter of this book, but it's the explanation of what Turner syndrome is. And because I've been to doctors who don't know what it is. And so, I was like, I wanted to, right off the bat, and as I was revising this book, my editor and I discussed how awesome it would be to let Libby be her own character right from the beginning and then kind of bring all that in. So that's so this was originally the first chapter, but now it's towards the beginning. And it's called X's and O's. There are a few reasons I'm different from Nani. A few reasons why piano doesn't work out so well. Why I'll always be shorter than her. Why my heart was ballooned up way too big when I was born. And why I have to wear hearing aids. It's sort of a big bundle of crazy, chaotic, dangerous weirdness that happened when I was born. You ready for this? Here it goes. Picture this. 1, the big tube of blood in your heart. It's called the aorta. Squeezed, pinched, and constricted so blood can't get through your heart. Has to pound harder and harder, growing bigger and bigger until it's ready to pop like some cheesy love song. 2, your small intestines in a sac outside your stomach where your belly button is supposed to be, and the doctor carefully pushing them back into place. Gross, but also kind of totally awesome. 3, the umbilical cord wrapping tighter and tighter around your neck like a boa constrictor. Fun times, right? When I was 2 weeks old, they took me in for heart surgery, stretching my arms up above my head so they could go in under my ribs instead of cracking open a 2-week-old sternum. I always imagine it like some kind of medieval torture device. I still have the long white scar across my left side from where they fixed my heart. Want to know why my heart was squeezed like a cat's head in a toilet paper tube? Here's how mom and dad explained it to me when I was 7 years old. It's like your body is a recipe cooked in your mom's belly. I know what a uterus is now, but when I was 7 and we were in the middle of a restaurant, they called it a belly. The recipe of you has 46 ingredients. Those ingredients are called chromosomes. Red hair, chromosomes. Bad eyesight, chromosomes. A nose like your great-grandpa Stan's, all thanks to chromosomes. You get 23 ingredients from your dad and 23 from your mom, and together, those ingredients make up the recipe of you. There are 2 special chromosomes that mean you're born male or female, and you get one of them from your mom and one from your dad. Except when you don't. The 2 female chromosome ingredients are XX. That means your mom is XX, and so when you get your 23 mom ingredients, you get one of her X's. Male ingredients are XY. That means it's your dad's ingredients that decide if you're born male or female. Here's how it works. Y is the male ingredient. Since dad is XY, if he gives you an X, you get 1 X from dad, 1 X from mom, and boom, bam, XX, you're a girl. If dad gives you a Y instead, then you've got X from mom, Y from dad, and XY, happy birthday, it's a boy. But it doesn't always work out like that. Sometimes you're just X. 1 X and something's missing. XO, which doesn't stand for hugs and kisses. It stands for missing ingredient. It doesn't bother me too much. In fact, some people who are called boys or girls when they're born decide that actually that word and all its associations don't suit them after all. But I've always felt like a girl all the way from my head to my toes. So I once asked my mom if having only 1 X meant I might be a boy. And she said, it's not like that because I don't have the Y male ingredient. And plus I don't feel like a boy at all. That means I'm just as much a girl as she is. Here are some more facts. 1 in every 2,500 girls is born XO. This is called Turner syndrome. Sometimes when a baby is getting made and the mom's body senses that it's missing an ingredient, her body stops making the baby and it dies before it's even born. That's called a miscarriage. A miscarriage happens to 99% of babies who are being made with a missing ingredient. That means I'm really lucky. Dad says it means I'm meant to be here. There are lots of other ways things can go wonky with the ingredients. For example, it's also possible to get an extra chromosome, an extra number 21 ingredient from mom or dad. That is called Down syndrome. Maybe it's miraculous anybody is born healthy at all. A miraculous protostar bursting out of a perfect mix of dust and heat. Turner syndrome fiddles with my heart in some ways, like my ballooned up heart. Like my neck, that's a bit thick on the sides. Like my ribs that are round like a barrel. Like my low set ears that don't hear exactly perfectly. Like how I have to give myself shots every day. But that's just physical stuff. My brain is still intact. I'm still going to get an A in biology. I'm still going to be a scientist. And that's that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah. That was great. And your internet seemed to work great.
Oh, good.
Okay, so next we'll go to Jenny Esplin, who will be reading from her novel, 96 Miles. 96 Miles is her first novel, and she won the Whitney Award for Best Novel by a Debut Author. Jenny lives in Las Vegas, Nevada, on the edge of town with her husband and kids. Jenny, go ahead.
Okay, well, I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for having me. This is my book, 96 Miles. It is a survival adventure novel. It's about two brothers who live in middle of nowhere, Nevada. And when a massive blackout hits the Western United States while their dad is away from home, they have to walk 96 miles down this deserted highway to reach help. So I'm just going to read right from the beginning, first sentence, chapter 1. I might skip a few sentences, so we'll see. Okay. Dad always said, if things get desperate, it's okay to drink the water in the toilet bowl. I never thought it would come to that. I thought I'd sooner die than let one drop of toilet water touch my lips. Yet here I am, kneeling before a porcelain throne, holding a tin mug for scooping in one hand and my half-gallon canteen in the other. Don't worry, I'm gonna boil it first. Behind me, my brother Stewart is making gagging noises. I'm gonna throw up, he says, which is something Stu says all the time, but does he ever actually throw up? No. He doesn't do most of the things he says he's going to do lately, like run away or kill himself or kill me. Come on, John, he says, the whine in his voice setting my teeth on edge. Do we really need this? I stop mid-scoop and stare up at him, holding back the pink padded toilet seat with my elbow. No, we don't need it, Stu. I just thought, oh, look, water from a toilet. That sounds refreshing. Let's drink it. His sullen dark eyes narrow at me, and I thrust the canteen into his hands. He kneels down to help me, but adds in a mumble, we have 2 canteens of water already. And that's a perfect example of how my brother thinks. 2 canteens of water, and we have a 3-day walk down an empty stretch of desert highway before we reach Brighton Ranch, our last chance for help. I'm no math genius, but before this ugly pink toilet came along, I figured we were short in the water department. It isn't Stu's math skills I'm questioning, though. If we'd found a pantry full of Aquafina in this abandoned shack of a home, Stu would have been the first one to start filling his pack. He knows how desperately we need water. What I'm questioning is his willingness to do anything hard, or in this case, anything revolting, in order to save himself. Yet we were raised by the same dad who preached self-reliance on pretty much a daily basis. I wouldn't have predicted this about Stewart. He's younger than me by 2 years, but he's always had a lot more determination when it comes to stuff like this. My dad calls it a strong mental fortitude. I couldn't say what my strengths are. I guess I'm good at yard maintenance and, according to my school counselor, using sarcasm to avoid conflict. And now that I think about it, I'm not exactly sure she meant that as a compliment. But my point is, in the face of a real natural disaster or a terrorist attack or a zombie apocalypse or whatever the heck happened 21 days ago that caused all the power to go out, I would have predicted that Stewart would have been the one talking me into doing hard things, not the other way around. Anyway, it's not like I want to drink toilet water, boiled or not, but what choice do we have? It's not like we're at a restaurant and the waiter is asking, would you like the bottled water or the toilet water from the creepy abandoned bathroom? Move closer, I say impatiently, motioning to Stu to bring the canteen over the bowl. He does it with a shaky hand, so I end up spilling toilet water on his fingers. His fault. Ah, gross, he says, jerking the canteen back. He switches hands, then wipes his wet one down the side of my pant leg before I can stop him. Real mature, I say. Real mature, he mimics. We've been together too long. Before I can realize what he means to do next, Stu is on his feet, upending the canteen, dumping all the water I just collected back into the toilet. Stop, I yell, jumping up and making a grab for the now empty canteen. What are you doing? We don't need this, he insists, hiding it behind his back like he's 10 years old or something. He's 11, which may not seem that much older than 10, but I swear under normal circumstances, he's the oldest 11-year-old I know. We could end up finding one of those hot springs along the way, he says. You never know. Or we could find a chocolate factory with a chocolate river inside, I say. Stu looks like he wants to hit me. What? Am I not allowed to come up with any what-if scenarios? He does this heavy sigh thing that he's been doing a lot lately. I think we should stop at the reservoir for water, he says. It's only a short detour. The short detour he's talking about is 16 miles out of the way. I don't know if he's thinking about this in terms of walking, but I've already made up my mind that we aren't stopping at the reservoir. With the supplies we have, and I'm including the toilet water, we'd be lucky to last 3 days out there in the desert. So we've got 3 days to get to Brighton Ranch. We can't afford to add 16 more miles to our already insanely long walk. And that's where I'll stop.
Thank you, Jenny. That was great. Next, we'll hear from Celeste Remington. Celeste Remington, reading from her novel, The Elephant's Girl. This is her debut novel. This is the third debut novel in a row, right? Was a selection for the Texas Bluebonnet Award Master List and the Oklahoma Children's Sequoia Master List. Her second novel, Tips for Magicians, is coming out in August 2021 and is already a Junior Library Guild selection. Celeste is an elephant advocate, a musical theater performer, and a member of the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. Celeste, go ahead. Oh, wait a minute. I mixed up the order, didn't I? I was going to do Shamila next. Okay, well, I just announced Celeste, so let's go ahead and have her go next. And then we'll do Shamila after that.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'm Celeste Remington and the author of The Elephant's Girl. The Elephant's Girl is a story about a foundling who is found after a very serious tornado. She's found asleep next to the African elephant in a zoo. And she is very young. She doesn't remember who she is or where she came from. So the train engineer who lives at the zoo, named Roger, finds her and he takes care of her and becomes her guardian. He names her Lexington, and she grows up in the zoo with her best friend Fisher, who is the zookeeper's son, and Roger, who is her guardian. And when she's 12 years old, she and Fisher are given permission to actually help with the care of the elephants in the elephant barn. And it's the first time that Lexington's had the opportunity to be really close to Naya, the elephant who saved her life. You find out at the beginning of the story that Lexington has this ability to hear the wind speaking to her. And she finds she has a very special connection with Naya the elephant and goes on an adventure to discover more about where she came from. So I'm going to start a little bit in, like Sarah did, about 26 pages in. And this is the scene when Lexington and Fisher are helping Thomas, the elephant manager, in the elephant barn. They have been helping an elephant named Jazz doing training for their care, and Naya has not come into the barn yet. And Lexington is remembering what she has experienced here at the zoo with the elephant. I don't remember anything before the tornado. Roger took me to some doctors, and they said that sometimes when people experience something traumatic, they forget what happened before the trauma. Sometimes they forget a little bit of what happened after, too. But I do remember feeling lost and confused and scrambling uphill through a terrible wind beneath a blackened sky. I remember hearing the wind speak to me for the first time. It said, "They're all gone, but I'm still here." I didn't know who was gone, but I knew I was alone except for the wind. I remember tree limbs strewn in my way and the sting of debris pelting my skin and feeling like maybe I had been in this place before. I remember an opening in the fence and an invisible pull to find something I knew was there. My fingers finding Naya standing tall and strong in the dark, the muddy and hay-sweet smell of her wrinkled skin, the feel of the muscles in her thick trunk, all 40,000 of them, not hurting me. And I wasn't alone anymore. The power of the storm was no match for the giant and gentle presence of Naya. I was rooted to the ground behind the shelter of her body, and the wind couldn't touch me. Then, as if she knew how frightened I'd been, she rumbled a sound too deep for my ears to hear. I felt the rumble in calming waves, and my brain understood it. It became a picture inside my head of two elephants in a field. They were entwining their trunks like a mother and baby. Naya was telling me something important, and I knew she would keep me safe from the dark and the storm, safe in this place, just like a mama elephant protects her baby. "If you don't pay attention, you'll miss what's right in front of you," Thomas says. His voice sounds a little stern, like going deep in my thoughts was somehow dangerous. I never miss a thing, I think. I notice everything. Jazz is turning to tap Thomas's outstretched target pole with her front leg. She's on the left side of the fence, and now Naya ambles in on the right. She sways with each step. Her trunk, powerful yet gentle, bobs up and down as the two fingers at the tip sense the air and feel the earth. She comes straight for me, her tail swinging behind her. Her soft eyes look only at me. My heartbeat changes with her approach, a stronger, longer beat that roots me to the earth, yet makes me feel like I have wings. Fisher hands me the target pole that I somehow dropped. I open the lower gate for her foot and hold out the target. Her trunk bounces and twists near my feet, feeling the ground on the other side of the barrier just inches from where I stand. Her eyelashes are so long they shadow her eyes, but I can still see the color. a perfect mix of light brown and gold. She lowers her head slightly and then moves closer, presenting her front left foot at the gate and tapping the target. Good girl, I say. Somehow, I feel it more inside my chest than in my throat. Good girl, Naya, Fisher says. Naya holds still, patient, while Thomas inspects her foot. I plunge my arm into the bucket and curl my fingers around a cool piece of apple, waiting. When Thomas finishes, I gently toss the apple along the barn floor to Naya. She finds it with the fingers of her trunk, grabs it, and presses it into her open mouth. Her lower lip flops loose as she chews, her eyelids closing as her mouth fills with the juice. I want to talk to her more, but Thomas says we must stick to words and commands the elephants are used to hearing. I want to tell her she's magnificent, she's beautiful, she's my rescuer. I want to tell her I'm sorry she misses her mama. I feel her heart. We have so much in common, Naya and I. And talking to her from the top of my treehouse, where only the wind can hear, is just not enough. And then Naya steps closer to the training gate again and feels for me with her trunk, as though she is seeking something more. Not too close, Lex, Thomas warns, doing his job. I look into Naya's light brown eyes. Suddenly, an image of trees and a wild-looking forest comes into my head through a low rumble that my ears didn't hear. It's been 7 years since my brain has felt this rumbling. Somehow, and I have no idea how, Naya is speaking to me. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste. You guys are all such great readers. It's wonderful to listen to your dramatic interpretations. Okay, Shamile Saeed Mendez will be reading us from her middle grade novel, On These Magic Shores. The first of the 2 novels she'll be reading today. Furia will be later on, a young adult novel. Shamile is a football-obsessed Argentine-American. She's a graduate of Voices of Our Nation and the Vermont College of Fine Arts MFA Writing for Children program. She writes picture books, middle grade, young adult, and adult romance fiction. She's a founding member of Las Musas, the first collective of women and non-binary Latinx middle grade and young adult authors. Both of the novels today that she'll be reading from today were Whitney Award finalists, and Furia won the Whitney Young Adult General Award. Shamile, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this wonderful presentation, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing with you all today. And I am going to be reading from On These Magic Shores, which is pretty much a part of my heart, like Furia is. Furia is the dreams that I had as a little girl, and On These Magic Shores is a lot about the fears that I had and another reality that I would imagine if sometime my mom would go missing. On These Magic Shores is a story of 3 sisters, especially the oldest, Minerva, who wants to be the first Latina president of the United States, and she has a plan set up to get to that goal. But and the first thing that she has to accomplish is become Wendy in the school Peter Pan play. And of course, I'm not gonna spoil anything by saying that she will not get that part, and then she has to figure out how to accomplish her plan. And I am going to read a scene that is very special for me, and it might spoil a little bit of what happens in her story, but it might also get you excited to see how she got to that point, because it's right at the end. The next day for the last performance, there was bad news. Wendy is sick, Jasmine said as soon as she saw me walking into the auditorium. It took me a minute to understand what she was talking about. Mama had been sick for so long, I never considered that anyone else could be sick too. What do you mean? It can't be that bad. I brushed her off. You don't understand. Bailey has food poisoning. She'll be okay, but she can't perform tonight. Mrs. Santos was frantic when she met me. I need you. You're the only one who can save us, she exclaimed, holding me by the shoulders. It was too amazing to be true. Now that I was ready to leave everything behind, now that the whole student council election meant nothing, because as this time tomorrow, I would be on a plane to summertime, to the other side of the world, now I got this chance. Wendy, darling, Cora had taught me to accept blessings when they came, and this was my parting gift from whoever it was that listened to girls in need, girls who'd never ever gotten a golden coin from the Tooth Fairy. Poor Bailey Cooper, sick at home. She would have so many other opportunities though, and I couldn't miss this chance. I'd let Tiger Lily go. I wasn't going to make the same mistake twice. Okay, Mrs. Santos, I said, I'm ready. Sometime around the middle of the play, I forgot to speak with an English accent. I truly believed I was flying over Netherlands, watching my little brothers admiring the brave Lily. My Wendy wasn't jealous of her at all. It was admiration all around. I didn't have to pretend to be enchanted by the light of Tinkerbell or her chime-like voice. She was magical, and I was so grateful for Maverick's brilliance in remembering the right cues for the tiny fairy. With the haste of being on stage, I'd forgotten to remind them, but everything turned out perfectly. At the end, when Wendy and her siblings and all the lost boys were safe in London, I guessed at the audience and improvised. I believe in fairies, I do, I do. The whole audience chanted with me. I do, I do. I knew that among the faces I couldn't really see were Mama and Abuela clapping like little girls along with my sisters. The ovation at the end was as thunderous as it had been during the first two showings. I bowed and curtsied and held Maverick's hand as we weaved through the audience to find my mom. Mr. Chang had seen the show too, and he had a bouquet of flowers for me. The sweet perfume made me blush. I felt like a señorita. Now that my childhood was almost behind me, a pang of longing settled in my chest. The star inside me glowed softly, making my cheeks warm, telling me everything would be okay. You were wonderful, Mama said, emotional and glowy-eyed. You were the perfect Wendy. Coda shrugged. You know how to act, that's for sure. Who knew you could be that sweet after all? Like a clown, I stuck out my tongue at Coda. We both laughed. The real star was Maverick, I said. He even remembered about the fairy. Maverick's face turned bright red. What do you mean? That was Miguel. Miguel was just crossing ahead of us. Miguel, come here, I called. He bounded in our direction, followed by a trail of little boys who looked exactly like him. Apparently, Jasmine had a handful of brothers to boss around and protect. What's up? Miguel asked. Were you manning Tinkerbell? Maverick asked him. Miguel shook his head. No way, that was you. It wasn't me, Maverick said, his voice low and awed. Mrs. Santos, I said. The three of us ran to look for our teacher. It wasn't me. I was enjoying the show from the audience with my friend, the Burkes, she said seriously, but her eyes shone. I think we've seen a miracle today. I do believe in fairies. I do, I do. She clapped all the way down the hallway before she met Mrs. Burke, who sent me the warmest smile of all.
Thank you, Shamile. You can take a rest now before you have to read again in a few minutes. Okay, and so our last middle grade author is Cindy Baldwin, who will be reading from Beginner's Welcome. Cindy was the previous author of Where the Watermelons Grow, which was an Oregon Spirit Book Award honor winner, and also an AML middle grade award finalist, and the Stars of Whistling Ridge. She lives just outside Portland, Oregon, with her husband and daughter. Cindy, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm super excited to be here tonight. And I mean, how can I even have the courage to read after all of those amazing selections? That was delightful to hear all of those. So I am going to be reading tonight from Beginner's Welcome, which is my second book. And it's about a girl named Annie Lee, who a couple months before the book opens, her father has unexpectedly died of a heart attack. And she and her mother are kind of trying to pick the pieces back up to their life and figure out how to move on. And she's decided that the best way to prevent herself from ever being hurt again is to be invisible, because invisible people can't be seen and invisible people can't be hurt by others. But her commitment to invisibility is challenged when she meets an elderly man at a local mall who plays piano so beautifully that his music creates magic lights in the air. And Annie Lee thinks maybe if she can learn to play the piano like he does, then it will help to heal all of the things that are broken inside her since her daddy died. So I am going to read, I usually read from the beginning of this book, but I was so moved by all of the selections tonight that I decided I'm actually going to go off script and read something that's from the later on in the book, where Annie Lee has started taking piano lessons with her new friend, whose name is Ray. Okay, Miss Annie Lee, Ray said as Stan disappeared around a corner. Take it from the top. Maybe we'll see if you're ready to start the next piece today, too. I unfolded the sheet music for Russian folk song in G and played through it, my fingers like elephants on the keys, until I got to the middle and things snarled up so bad I let both my hands smash down on the keyboard in frustration, making a sound like the piano's last dying wail. Through the big window of a music shop nearby, I could see a teenage clerk jump and drop the cell phone she'd been scrolling through. I scowled. Now, come on, said Ray, and I wondered if he ever in his life had gotten truly mad about anything. It didn't sound half bad. How can you say that? It was terrible. Nah, it's coming right along. I closed my hands into fists and banged on the keys again, short and sharp. The music store girl winced. So much for my invisibility cloak. I'm never going to be any good, Ray. I might as well give up now. Aw, don't give me that now. It just takes practice, don't it? What's the point? I'm hopeless. I paused, looking down at the keys, cool under my hands. I'm all broken. I don't know, Miss Annie Lee. I guess I kind of think it's our brokenness that makes us beautiful, makes us who we are, and not our perfection. I let my fist slide off the keyboard into my lap. Think about the courtyard out there, Ray continued. All those bricks making up the path. Have you ever noticed how the weeds push up through them anyway, all green and brave and strong? I nodded. It's like that, Annie Lee. You can think how you want, but it's my personal opinion that everything's more beautiful when it's had to fight hard to come up the way those weeds have. The way I see it, Annie Lee, avoiding risk is no way to live. You can get hurt no matter what you do, if you take chances or if you don't take them. But think of all the good parts you'd miss. I thought of Miss Johnson asking me to stay for dinner the week before, and Mama saying her family went to the beach a few weeks every summer and she said she still kept swimming. I don't think I could have done that. But doesn't it just open you up to get hurt more when you take risks like that? I told him about Mama's friend who got stung by the jellyfish. I read once that a man-of-war sting feels like getting cut all over with a hot knife. How could Mama's friend risk that again? Sounds like she was pretty brave, your Mama's friend. Brave enough to go off and find her joy, even if it had cost her pain in the past. And wise, too. Just think of all the things she'd have missed if she'd stayed away from the water her whole life. You ever been to the beach, Annie Lee? You ever felt that silky salt water against your skin? I hunched my shoulders, pulling into myself like a turtle. I dare you to tell me something, child. Tell me what you'd do right this very minute if you were ready to be the bravest, wisest version of Annie Lee Fitzgerald you could be. I swallowed. There's a girl at school. Oh, yeah? Her name's Mitch. She's my friend, I guess. Maybe my best friend now. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it feels like there's a cage wrapped around my heart ever since my daddy died. I laced my fingers through each other hard, tight like bars, like this. I thought with a pang about what it had been like when Mitch hadn't shown up to school the week before, like I'd been twice as alone, twice as invisible as before. A few days ago in English class, the teacher had read a poem about two roads diverging and how the writer had to choose which to take. In some ways, everything in my life right now felt like that poem, like I was stuck between two different roads and I didn't know which one was better. Down one road, there was just me, invisible Annie Lee who couldn't be hurt or broken anymore. But it was awfully lonely and boring too. And that Annie Lee was the one who couldn't remember how to smile or have fun or what it even felt like to be happy. Down the other road, there was Mitch and Ray and Queenie and even Mama, the happy, smiling Mama who'd taken me hiking at Eno River State Park the Sunday before. That road had note passing in science class and sitting together at lunch and piano lessons and smiles and friends. Love. But that road was scary too, because what if all those people disappeared? Like Daddy, like Monica and Meredith. If I was so really brave and wise, maybe I'd know how to stop holding on so hard to Daddy. Maybe I'd figure out how to let go of the pro section on that pro-con list about the ghost in our apartment. Maybe I'd be ready to live my life the way it was, instead of the way it used to be. I didn't know how to say any of that to Ray, though. Instead, I took a deep breath. If I was really brave and wise, I'd find a way to open up that cage and let Mitch in. And maybe other people, too. That would be brave and wise indeed, said Ray. And you know what, Annie Lee? I bet you could do it. I'm sure of it. You just have to stop thinking about what's hiding in the water and get out and swim. Yeah, I said quietly, and I stopped, squeezing my laced together fingers so hard they hurt. If I was really brave, I'd go all in, take my invisibility cloak all the way off. Yes? There's something else I'd do if I was brave too. Oh, what's that? Slowly, I pulled my right hand away from my left one and reached into my pocket. The paper was still there where it had been for weeks now. It was fading fast from rubbing against the inside of my shorts and from being washed once or twice. I took the paper out now and spread it out on the piano in front of me. Cash prizes. Beginners welcome. Ray studied it for a minute, his expression never changing. When he'd finished reading it, he nodded. I've heard good things about this competition, Annie Lee. I'm not a member of the association, of course, but I've got a friend who is, and I bet he'd help me register you for the competition if you'd like. So, if you were brave, you'd enter. Is that right? My chin jerked up and down so quick it was hardly a nod at all. I couldn't meet Ray's eyes. Well then, said Ray quietly, are you sure about quitting today, or are you ready to be brave? That's it.
Thank you. That was great.
Thanks.
What a wonderful group of middle grade novels those are. We're so glad to be able to hear from everybody. Oh, and I mistakenly said for Cindy that The Stars of Whistling Ridge had come out. It's actually coming out in another 2 weeks, right? Her third novel on June 15th. So I'll look forward to that. And let me just say that a little added treat, Mahoney Stewart is one of our novelist finalists, and he was not able to participate in the novel readings a couple days ago, but he's able to come with us, join with us today. So at the very end, we'll also have a reading from his novel, A New Age of Miracles, about Joseph Smith and his family. So we'll have that at the very end. But next we'll have Ryan Shoemaker, one of the finalists in the short story category. And he's going to read to us from The Water Between Us, which was published in the literary journal Barzaka. His 2018 debut short fiction collection, Beyond the Lights, was an AML Award finalist. His fiction has appeared in Sunstone, McSweeney's Internet Tendency, Dialogue, A Journal of Mormon Thought, Silk Road Review, and many other journals. He's an assistant professor of English at Southern Utah University. Ryan, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me hang out with you tonight. A short story writer among you. So yes, I'll be reading The Water Between Us. The main character, the narrator's name is Spencer. He's newly married, works in construction. It's the story takes place during the recession of about 10 years ago. And he's struggling to find work while his wife, Anne, who's pregnant, her career is taking off. So I'm just going to read 6 minutes of the story, starting with the beginning. I wrote this for my wife, dedicated to her. I think this emerged from a time in my life when I was a stay-at-home dad and kind of struggling with that experience. And this was a way to explore that. The Water Between Us. Lately, when I call her at work, she's taken to firing off questions, like she's in the habit of keeping pace with the ringing phones and hurried conversations around her. With all those questions, she tires pretty easy, just the realities of pregnancy, I guess. But maybe it's more than that. Now she's all business at work, all efficiency, nothing wasted, no chit-chat, just the facts. She says, "You hear back on those jobs, Spencer?" I say, "No, not a word, Ann. Bad time to be out of work." She says, "And that employment place on Auburn Way?" I say, "Talked to them this morning. Truthfully, I think they're tired of hearing from me." I'm calling her from home, dressed and work boots on, but nowhere to go. Just me and the TV, but no news cycle. I can't take it. All the talk of bankruptcy and bailouts and unemployment rates makes me feel like a statistic. Instead, I got this infomercial on, the Ronco rotisserie oven. Ron in a green apron and a pink collared shirt, hefting a roasted chicken for the audience, who can't seem to get enough, grinning and shaking their heads in stupid disbelief. A man in an apron and a pink shirt, holding a roasted chicken, and that smile. I guess when you own the company, when it's your show, you can smile like that, apron and all. Anne says, "And what about that place on C Street? Work today, paid today, right? It'd get you out of the house." Ron slides an entire pork roast into a rotisserie oven, a dozen rotisserie ovens loaded with hot dogs, bratwursts, racks of ribs, and stuffed chicken breasts whirl behind him. Work today, paid today. I close my eyes. How do I tell Anne? How do I describe that dim waiting room, the scuffed floor and grimy lawn chairs, the sour smell of worry and fear? How do I explain all those sad, angry faces? There's no time. She's too busy. I say, Anne, I'm telling you, nothing. I hear her fingers tapping at a keyboard. A phone rings twice, then stops. She says, something will come along, but the words sound empty. Her mind is elsewhere, I can tell. Her eyes fixed to a screen, puzzling out, just as she'll do most nights at the kitchen table, long after I've gone to bed. All the rows of numbers, the circles portioned into colored slices, the thin columns rising and falling, a language I can't make sense of. I say, it's in the cards, Anne, and maybe I hear the same emptiness in my voice. I touch the remote. Ron and the grinning audience and the rows of spinning rotisserie ovens vanish, and there's only a screen, shiny and black as a piece of obsidian. I have to stand up. I have to move. I have to get out of the house, out of this quiet that seems to press in when Anne's not here, and lately, even when she is. In this house, I'm beginning to feel as heavy and lifeless as the furniture. I tell Anne, how about we meet up at Game Farm Park, noon? The phone pressed to my ear, I can almost see Anne in her cubicle, the computer, the open calendar, the scroll of the mouse, the quick glance at her watch, her mind ticking through a half dozen small calculations, all the unavoidable adjustments to meet me. Sure, she says, okay, but I have a meeting at 1. Then a quick sigh. I have to go, Spencer. My manager wants to meet. 4 years ago, when we were just married, I was at Sandberg Construction in Algona. Same job I worked for a year after graduating from Auburn High. Same job I came back to after 2 years as a Mormon missionary in Lubbock, Texas. In all that time at Sandberg, I'd worked my way up from shovel to an excavator. I'd learned enough to take pasture, nothing but field grass and blackberry thickets, and put in sewer and drainage, grade it, measure out sidewalks and streets, then lay asphalt and pour concrete. Back then I'd say, this is temporary, Anne, just until I save enough money for some equipment and a piece of land. I won't have to work for anyone, my own company, my own crew. She'd say, I like ambition. She was finishing up at Green River College and waitressing nights at Mitzel's. Sometimes I'd stop in after work, steam rising off my damp Carhartt jacket. I'd squeeze into one of the padded booths, and then we'd pretend we didn't know each other, like it was a game. She'd hand me a menu and fill my glass. I'd say, what do you recommend? The salmon, the steak? She'd say, sir, for you, the salmon. I'd say, no, the steak, medium rare. I'd wink and run my hand down her thigh if she was close enough, give her breast a squeeze when she'd lean over to fill my glass. She'd say, sir. I'd say, pardon me, ma'am. After all day up to my knees in water and muck, digging trenches and laying pipe, I thought I deserved her attention. It seemed the proper order of things, a day's work and a hot meal. Someday there'd be a house on a nice piece of land, a covered place for my equipment, a big workshop, a company I'd call my own, and a bunch of kids running around. I'd give Anne the life I thought she deserved. Then last November, Sandberg dies right there in his pickup on the 167, heart attack. His wife sold everything, gave the crew a little bonus, cried a lot, and told us how sorry she was. That was right before the housing market bottomed out. Banks stopped loaning, no building, no hiring, the Great Recession, they're calling it. And that's where I'm at, not a prospect in sight. But Anne's moving forward. She finished her associates and transferred all those credits into a business management major at UW Tacoma. Now she works in marketing for a biotech firm in North Auburn, some Singapore company unaffected by the economic dip. I should be happy for her, and I am, for the work she's put in, and grateful for what she's making, more than I ever did. She talks about wanting to be director of marketing, maybe a VP down the road. But after 10 months without work, nothing for me, just a dozen resumes in the wind. And all this time at home, I've been thinking about when Anne worked at Mitzel's. I don't know why, but I can't shake the image of me sitting there in a damp Carhartt jacket and muddy Danner boots, watching Anne weave through the tables with a pitcher of water in each hand. It's like she's moving towards something, real slow, but moving. And then I see myself there in that booth, touching her thigh as she fills my glass. And I think, he has no right, none at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. We're putting the link to that story in that's the great thing about short stories. They're often available online. So we'll put in the link to that in the comments. So now we'll move to the young adult novels. We'll start with Dean Hughes, who will be reading from his novel Displaced. Dean is a best-selling writer who has published well over 100 books. We've had some first-time authors here. Dean's on the other side of that. He holds a PhD from the University of Washington and has taught English at Central Missouri State University and BYU. His previous AML awards include, deep breath, the 1994 Young Adult Novel for the Trophy, 1998 Novel Award for Far From Home, one of the Children of the Promise series, then a 2005 Smith Pettit Foundation Award for Outstanding Contribution to Mormon Letters for the entire Children of the Promise series, 2013 Outstanding Achievement Award for his entire writing career, and a 2019 Novel Award for Muddy, Where Faith and Polygamy Collide, which also won the Whitney Award from the Storymakers that year. Okay, well, Dean, go ahead. You gotta unmute. And still not unmuted.
Oh, now am I okay? Okay, I thought you were going to unmute me. I just said if it was an award for an entire career, I wonder why I'm still writing. Displaced is my newest book, and it came out of an experience of my wife and I, Kathy, serving a mission in Beirut, and we lived in an apartment, and we would go down a little hill from our apartment, and there was a big intersection there, and there was a little boy. Later learned he was 11 years old. Would be there every day, and he was there for the full year and a half that we were there. And he would, when the cars would stop at the intersection, he would walk between the cars, try to sell little items. I learned later that these kids were called the street children of Beirut, and they were trying to help their families. They were almost all Syrian refugees. So based on knowing something about him and learning more about these kids, I developed this novel, and I'm starting from the beginning. Hadi Saleh was sitting on a stack of concrete blocks. He was leaning forward, looking down, the hood of his jacket pulled over his head. He could feel drops of rain pat against his shoulders, and he could see the splashes on the wet sidewalk near his feet. The wheels of cars rolled slowly past him, sloshing out little currents of water against the curb. He crossed his arms against his chest to stay as warm as he could, and he waited. He knew without thinking about it how long it took until the light changed and the cars stopped. Knew he had only a few more seconds to himself before he would have to face the drivers again. Still, he waited. A few drivers always ran the red light, and then the intermittent blast of car horns would turn into a full wild blare. It was always the same, honking, yelling, and frantic drivers maneuvering through the nightmare traffic, stopping only when they had no other choice. But finally, the wheels did stop rolling, and Hadi got up. He walked around to the driver's side of the first car in line. He pulled cardboard packages of gum from his jacket pocket, chiclets in 4 flavors, cinnamon, spearmint, fruit, and peppermint. He fanned out the boxes on his palms close to the window so the driver could see the choices. But the woman inside didn't look at him. She stared straight ahead. It was the usual thing. So Hadi walked over to the first car on the inside lane and held the gum out again, this time on the passenger side. This driver, a young man, glanced at him, then shook his head. Hadi didn't say anything, didn't plead. He had tried that in the beginning long ago and found it was a waste of his time. He walked to the next car and the next, back and forth between the 2 lanes. An older man with a stubbly beard and tired eyes glanced toward him from one of the cars. His window was halfway open, even in the rain. He was smoking, holding his cigarette close to the window, so the breeze drew the smoke up and out of the car. When Hadi stopped and presented his packages of gum, the man said without looking at Hadi in a low, hostile voice, "Why do you do this every day? No one wants your gum." Hadi turned to walk away, but he heard the man say, "You Syrian pigs need to get out of our country, all of you." Hadi didn't respond, didn't even give the man's words a second thought. He heard such things every day. Words didn't change what he had to do. The clock in his head was telling him that the stoplight would soon turn green and the cars would start to move. Already drivers who were 9 and 10 back from the intersection were beginning to honk. He had no idea why they thought that would speed things up. He made one last offer, got another head shake, then cut between 2 cars to the sidewalk and walked down the little slope to the corner, back to his stack of concrete blocks. Hottie sat down and leaned forward. He listened to the padding of the rain on his hood again. At least the storm was light today. Rain came often to Beirut in the winter, sometimes falling in torrents. And even when it didn't rain, days were cold, sometimes windy. He was wearing a sweatshirt under his rain jacket, one that had been given to him by a charity organization in his neighborhood. But his feet were freezing, his hands, his face. Still, he was relieved there was no flooding at the bottom of the hill today. The splashes from the cars weren't reaching him. Before long, he heard the slowing of tires and the crazy honking started again. Hottie got up, started again. He walked to each car. The drivers stared away from him or they shook their heads. This time, no one cursed him or insulted him, but that didn't matter to Hottie. What mattered was that he sold no gum again. Thanks.
Now we'll hear again from Shamila Sayed Mendez, reading from her novel, young adult novel, Furia. Shamila, can you give me a better pronunciation of your name and the book?
Yes. My name is pronounced Shamila Sayed Mendez. I am from Argentina, like the character in my book, Furia. And there are a few overlapping similarities, but this is not my autobiography. So just Camila and I were born and raised in Rosario. And Furia is about a girl who wants to become a soccer player in a city obsessed with soccer. But it's only soccer when men are the protagonists. And she faces a lot of obstacles at home and in society. She's living in a society in which she encounters a lot of violence, not only her, but women and girls in general. And it's a very special thing today that I get to read from Furia, as today is also the 6th anniversary of the Ni Una Menos movement, which is a movement that started in Argentina and spread all over the world. And it's a movement asking for the stop of violence against girls and women and equal rights. So I thought it was very fitting that I would get to read from Furia today. But instead of reading from an emotional section, I'm going to read from a more tender one. And in the section that we're gonna see Camila today, she is having a really hard time on the field. She is not talking to her best friend. Her boyfriend is in Italy, being a soccer star in Juventus. And she just feels like nothing she's doing even matters. And more girls go missing every day. So she decides to go to the place where she tutors children. That's called El Buen Pastor, the Good Shepherd. And it's an old prison for women and disobedient wives that has been reclaimed as a cultural center for her community. And it's actually based in a real place. Father Hugo and the kids didn't expect me at El Buen Pastor on Saturdays, but Coach Alicia's words felt like too heavy a burden to carry on my own. Roxana had always helped me process the messes at home and at school. Without her, I had no one to talk to. Diego and I could text all day long, but when he asked me why Roxana was angry, I didn't want to unload my drama on him. He didn't need to worry about my problems, and deep down, I didn't want him to. What could he do from the other side of the world? I didn't want to go back home. Mama would be there, quietly working in the corner. A Penelope who refused to accept her Ulysses was a monster. She constantly moped over how much she missed Pablo and blamed me for him leaving. El Buen Pastor, once a prison for incorrigible daughters, was not the only place where I felt welcome. A group of kids played football in the dappled sunshine of the inner courtyard. Sister Cristina was the goalie for one of the teams, and when she blocked the shot, all the kids ran to her in celebration. She saw me and waved happily before turning back to the game. Lautaro was already kicking off again. My eyes prickled. I had forgotten how beautiful football was. Without referees, lines on the ground, trophies, tournaments, or life-changing contracts, the ball was a portal to happiness. A little hand tugged on my sleeve. Senor, do you want to play goalie for my team? Bautista asked. His brown eyes were huge, his little face flushed from the exercise. His invitation was tempting, but I could hear voices coming from my classroom. I'm having fun watching, but thank you, I replied. You come in if you get tired of standing there like a palm tree, okay? He ran back to his team, his too big Juventus jersey flapping around him. In my classroom, Karen sat at the head of the table, my usual spot. She didn't stutter as she read from Un globo de luz anda suelto. It was as if a new Karen had emerged. 5 other girls encircled her, hanging on her every word. They were all about the same age, that awkward stage right at the beginning of puberty. Baby faces, budding breasts, bashful eyes, dark-haired golden goddesses with the latent power to change the world if given one chance. Their enraptured faces turned to Karen as if she were the sun, the light in her voice germinating the seeds Alma's words planted. I tried not to make a sound. I didn't want to break the spell. Eventually, one of them looked up and, puckering her lips, pointed in my direction. Karen felt her friend's restlessness and followed their gazes. When she saw me, she smiled, her nose crinkling adorably. Senor, she said. The girls kept asking about the books, and I told them that it was the best if I read to them. Bautista, followed by a younger boy with Down syndrome, burst into the room and bellowed, "Time for the semi-final." The girls turned toward Karen, and she rolled her eyes but nodded. One by one, they left in respectful order, then broke into a run once out the door. What was that all about? I asked, sitting next to Karen, who placed a bookmark on her page, put the book away, and taken another from the pink backpack Diego had given her. It was Locas Mujeres by Gabriela Mistral. I hadn't read it, but the title alone made me laugh. Karen, I said, where did you get that one? The library, she said, chin lifted high. There's a version with an English translation, but I don't like it as much, so I'm doing my own. And why weren't you reading this to the girls? She scoffed. Apostle Paul says that first you must feed the babies with milk, and then when they're ready, you give them meat. I shivered. I wasn't worthy to stand in her presence. You're amazing. She blushed. So are you, Maestra Camila. Then she hesitated. At first I thought it was her stutter, but then I realized she was trying not to offend me. Are you going to leave us too? Are you going to go live with Diego in Italy? Now I was the one having a hard time finding the right words. Diego and we've loved each other since we were little kids, you know? Like Nicanor Angora, she asked. Like Nicanor Angora, I said. But I have my own dreams too. I play on my own football team. I want to play professionally one day. Her eyes widened at the revelation. But you're so smart. You speak English. You go to school. You have choices. I like to play, and I happen to be very good at it. I have choices, and football is my choice. I won't ever give up when I have a chance to make it. Not even for Diego, not even for him. Does he know yet? I'm following my own path, Chiquita. But he's your true love. Karen sounded like any little girl hoping for a happily ever after. When she saw me, she saw her teacher, a role model to follow. I didn't want her to think that to be free and happy, a woman had to turn her back on love, but I didn't know how to do both. Outside the window, the frogs and the crickets sang to the setting sun. He said he'd wait for me. Karen nodded slowly. She was only 10. She wanted to believe that love was possible for crazy, incorrigible girls like us.
Thank you, Shamila. It's great. Did the cover artist use you as a model?
No, I actually sent her a picture of a couple of my nieces from Argentina, and we, like Camila, we are descendants of a Palestinian grandfather. So that's why I have an Arabic name, and we don't look like what people sometimes think Argentine people look like, but we are Argentinian.
Okay, so next we're going to hear from Trisha Levinseller, who was from the title thing. Trisha Levinseller, reading to us from The Shadows Between Us. Now, Trisha couldn't be with us tonight, so she provided a video of her reading. She's the author of The Daughter of the Pirate King duology, Warrior of the Wild, Shadows Between Us, and the forthcoming Blade of Sea. She writes young adult high fantasies with heavy romantic subplots. She's been a finalist for the Whitney and AML Awards several times. She received a degree in English language and editing, and now lives in the Rocky Mountains.
Hi everyone, I'm Trisha Levinseller and I'm here to do a reading for The Shadows Between Us. This is a standalone fantasy that came out in 2020 and it's what I like to call my Slytherin romance. It's about a girl who sets out to woo the Shadow King, marry him, and then kill him so she can take his kingdom for herself. So let's read from the beginning, chapter 1. They've never found the body of the first and only boy who broke my heart, and they never will. I buried Hector Galanus in a hole so deep even the devils couldn't reach him. My dream was of him, of the day he told me it had been fun, but he was done. Some other girl had caught his fancy. I don't even remember her name. At the time, all I could think of was the fact that I'd given everything to Hector. My first kiss, my love, my body. And when I told him I loved him, all he had to say was, thanks, but I think it's time we moved on. He had other things to say, too. When I sank my knife into his chest, words came spilling out of him almost as fast as the blood. He couldn't make sense of it. I couldn't either. I barely remembered grabbing the knife Father had given to me for my 15th birthday, 3 months previous, with its jeweled handle and silver sheen. But I do remember that Hector's blood matched the inlaid ruby. I also remember what finally helped my head catch up with my pounding heart, the last word out of Hector's lips. Alessandra. His last word was my name. His last thought was of me. I won. That knowledge settles within me now just as it did 3 years ago, that sense of rightness, of peace. I lift my arms into the air, stretching like a cat before rolling over in bed. A pair of brown eyes is only inches from my own. Devils, Myron, why are you staring at me, I ask. He presses a kiss to my bare shoulder. Because you're beautiful. Myron lies on his side, his head propped up on a closed fist. My bed sheets cover him from the waist down. It's a wonder he fits in my bed, he's so tall. Floppy curls sprawl across his forehead, and he flicks back his head to clear his vision. The scent of sandalwood and sweat wafts over me. With a hand, I keep the sheets held up over my chest as I rise to a sitting position. Last night was fun, but you should go. I have much to do today. Myron stares at my chest, and I roll my eyes. Perhaps again later? I ask. He looks up at me before his eyes flip meaningfully to my chest once more. No, wait, not my chest. To the hand holding the sheets in place and the extra weight I now feel there. There's a diamond on my finger. It's beautiful, cut in an egg shape and buried in gold. It winks in the morning light as I tilt my hand from side to side. The ring is by far the most expensive trinket he's ever given me. Alessandra Stathos, I love you. Will you marry me? Laughter fills the room, and Myron flinches at it. I quickly place my free hand over my lips. What are you thinking? I say a moment later. Of course not. I stare down at the gorgeous ring once more. With this gift, Myron has outlived his usefulness. For some reason, my lovers cease to give me expensive presents once I turn down their proposals. Alas. But we're so happy together, he says. I will cherish you every day, give you everything you deserve. I will treat you like a princess. Only he knew I have my sights set a bit higher than that. It's a very kind offer, but I'm not ready to settle down just yet. But I've shared your bed, he splutters. Yes, he and 3 other boys this month. And now it's time for you to leave it. I move to rise from the bed when the door to my chambers bursts open. Myron freezes with his hand outstretched toward me, and my father, Sergio Stathos, Lord Masus, looks down at what he can see of our naked bodies. Leave, he bites out in a deathly quiet voice. My father is shorter than my 5.5 feet, but he's built like a bull with a thick neck, wide shoulders, and keen eyes that pierce to the soul. Myron tries to take the sheets with him, but I've got them firmly clamped around myself. When he fails to wrest them from me, he reaches down to grab his pants. Leave now, father specifies. But listen, or I will have you whipped. Myron stands, barely. He hunches as though he can hide his tall frame. He makes it halfway to the door before turning. My ring? Surely you want me to keep it so I can remember our time together? Myron's face twists. He has one foot pointed toward the door and the other toward me. Father growls. Myron takes off at a run, nearly tripping over my father's boots as he bolts over the threshold. Once he's gone, father turns to me. Make it difficult for me to find you a suitable match when you're caught with a new bedfellow every night. Don't be ridiculous, father. That was Myron's 5th day. Alessandra, you must stop this. It's time for you to grow up, to settle down. Has Chrysantha found a husband then? Father knows very well the law forbids me to marry until my older sister does. There is an order to things. Father treads over to the bed. Shadow King has dismissed a number of single women from the palace, Chrysantha among them. I'd hoped your sister would catch his eye, rare beauty that she is. Oh yes, Chrysantha is a rare beauty, and she's as dumb as a rock. But it was not to be, father concludes. Myron's free, I offer. Father levels a glare at me. She will not wed Myron. Chrysantha will be a duchess. I've already made arrangements with the Duke of Folios. He's an aging man who wants a pretty girl on his arm. It's done. That means it's your turn. Finally. You've suddenly taken an interest in my future, have you? I ask, just to make it difficult. I've always had your best interests in mind. A complete untruth. The only time father bothers to think of me is when he catches me doing something he thinks I shouldn't. Chrysantha has been his focus my entire life. Father continues, I'm going to approach the Earl of Orcus to discuss the match of you and his son, who will inherit one day. Soon, I should think, given the Trixie's ailing health. That should make you happy. It doesn't. You're certainly not going to remain my problem forever. So touching, father, but I've got my sights set on another man. And just who would that be? I stand, pulling the sheets up with me before tucking it under my arms. The Shadow King, of course.
Thank you, Trisha. Next, we'll hear from Kara McDowell, who will read from her novel One Way or Another. Kara was born in the mountains and raised in the desert, spent her childhood swimming, boating, and making up stories in her head. Now she lives in Mesa, Arizona, where she divides her time between writing, baking, and playing board games with her husband and 3 young sons. Her previous novel, Just for Clicks, was a Whitney Award General Young Adult finalist. Kara?
Hello. All right, so I'm going to be reading from One Way or Another. This is my YA romance that came out in 2020. This is about 17-year-old Paige who has really bad anxiety, and it's especially debilitating when it comes to making decisions. So at the beginning of this book, she is given the opportunity to spend her Christmas break either exploring New York City for the first time, which is somewhere she's always wanted to go and she's always wanted to travel. So that is really exciting to her. But she's also given a chance to go spend a week at a cabin with her best friend Fitz, who she is secretly in love with and has been for a long time. And so she's not sure what to do. She's having a hard time making a decision, and she downloads a Magic 8-Ball app to her phone and decides that she's just going to do whatever the app tells her. And then she slips and falls and bumps her head, and the book splits into 2 timelines. So we get to see what happens when she goes to New York and at the cabin. And I'm going to read from the first chapter of her going up to the cabin. And part of her motivation for wanting to do this is that she wrote this letter expressing her feelings for her friend Fitz. And because of a series of misfortunes, it accidentally ended up in his possession. So she needs to get it back before he finds out how she really feels for him. Okay, so Fitz Wilding wears confidence like a crown. He's quick with a lazy grin, comfortable in every situation, and so adaptable it makes my head spin. He's everything I'm not, and I hate him for it. Of course, I don't hate him enough, not nearly. If my hate were born of actual resentment and not of heartbreak, I'd be immune to the fact that he looks so heart-stoppingly good all the time. Take baseball, for example. Fitz looks real good at third. Knees bent in a crouch, blue eyes serious, glove ready, brown hair curling under the edge of his hat. Fitz watching a movie is equally phenomenal because every emotion plays out on his face. I've probably spent entire days of my life watching Fitz watch movies. The proximity of his body to mine is always more interesting than the actors on the screen. My favorite Fitz, however, is him behind the wheel of his pickup truck. All our best conversations have taken place in the cab of that truck. It's where he confessed that he wants to play professional ball and where I confessed that I want to travel the world, and we bonded over the tragedy of having impossible dreams. We're admittedly an odd pair, the jock with a team full of baseball friends and a new girl in his DMs every week, and me, the girl with one other friend and no inclination to play sports. Fitz and I met in 7th grade English class and likely would have stayed classroom-only friends if his sister wasn't always late picking him up from practice and my mom's shifts didn't end until 30 minutes after whatever after-school activity I joined to avoid being home alone. Those hot afternoons sitting with him on the curb outside of school quickly became the best part of my day. And when I saw him turn down a ride from another parent to wait with me, I realized he was enjoying them too. My breath catches at the sight of him now. Hat on, windows down, left arm bent at the elbow, fingers lightly tapping the top of the frame. No matter how many girls he dates, I'm convinced that vulnerable, thoughtful, silly Fitz behind the wheel is someone very few people know. I'm sick of the thought that I'm one letter away from losing access to my favorite version of him. Give it some time, I remind myself as I cross the front lawn on shaky legs. Be patient. If I make a big deal about getting the letter back, he's going to realize that the letter is a big deal. I could have driven, I say as I open the door and hoist myself up into the passenger seat. His truck is one of those giant monstrosities with enormous tires that's killing the planet. It belongs to his father's landscaping company, but it's basically Fitz's to use as he pleases. The only vehicle I have access to is Mom's old sedan, but because she's on a plane to New York, she agreed to let me drive to the cabin. No way. He checks his mirrors and pulls away from the curb. On the off chance the storm hits early, I want you safe in a 4-wheel drive with snow tires. He glances at me and frowns. What happened to your head? I rub at the small lump on my forehead. Slipped and fell. I'm fine. And thanks for letting me come a few days early and crash your family's Christmas. Are you sure your parents don't mind? Mom's hyped. She lives for hosting big holiday celebrations. But I feel bad that your mom had to leave last minute like that. So the thing is, I lied. Fitz knows how badly I want to travel, and he wouldn't understand why I chose not to go to New York. I told him an abbreviated version of the truth, that Mom won a ticket at work, not a lie, and was using it to visit her sick friend, also not a lie. What about your dad? I hesitate, wondering if I can get away with another evasion. The fact is, my dad's uninformed about this last-minute turn of events. He's busy, I say, feeling decent about the probable truth of that response. Most adults I know love to talk about how busy they are. Fitz frowns in sympathy and my stomach squirms. I hate pseudo lying to him, despite the fact that I lie by omission every day of my life. So, did you bring the letter that I wrote? I aim for casual and fall spectacularly short, just on this side of eager. No? Was I supposed to? No, but I need it back. Where is it? Fitz looks at me sideways, his face hesitant. On the counter, maybe? You lost it? No, it's definitely in the cabin. I'm just not sure where. He shrugs, the corners of his mouth turning up in a sheepish smile. I take a deep breath as liquid dread oozes through my belly. Don't panic. Easier said than done. Because what if the letter is sitting on the counter and a glass of water spills, soaking the envelope, and Mrs. Wilding tears it open to allow the letter to air dry, but as she sees the ink slowly spreading, she takes a picture of it to preserve it forever, and while snapping the picture, sees an incriminating word or sentence or paragraph and reads it, then tells the whole family, and by the time I get there, everyone will know my secret. What if? This is my worst nightmare, and I felt it coming in my bones. I opened my eyes this morning with a feeling of unease looming at the edge of my mind, whispering that I've done something wrong, or am about to do something wrong, or have done everything wrong my entire life. It happens more often than I'd like to admit, and the worst part is the unpredictability. I'll go to sleep feeling perfectly fine, only to wake up feeling like I've been sucker punched in the stomach. What's wrong? Nothing, I say, because how can I explain it to him when I don't have the words to understand it myself? The end.
That was great. Thank you to all the young adult authors. So we'll end with a reading from an adult novel. We'll move into the regular, or not regular, adult novel category. Mahoney Stewart from his novel New Age of Miracles. Mahoney is a national award-winning playwright, novelist, screenwriter, poet, theater producer, and educator. He is the editor of Saints on Stage, an anthology of modern drama, and has published several of his many plays, including The Drowned Book, History of William Shakespeare Part Last, Farewell to Eden. Mahoney has won the 2012 AML Drama Award for his play A Roof Overhead and an AML Lifetime Achievement Award. He received a Master of Fine Arts degree in dramatic writing from Arizona State University, and this is his first novel.
All right. As Andrew said, this is kind of out of my genre. I've been writing plays for who knows how long. but I've also always loved literature and novels, and I teach English and theater. And so it's something I love. The book is A New Age of Miracles. It's about early Mormon history. And I've always loved reading source documents and biographies and various different kind of things in Mormon history. And so this was kind of my love letter to all of that. So all the characters in here, I try to root in history and most of the scenes as well. And it was a labor of love that took me 10 years to kind of revise and put in a place which I was pleased with. So, all right, we'll jump in. This is, the scene is, this particular scene is from two more minor characters' points of view, Sally Chase and Willard Chase. They were treasure diggers and people in Joseph Smith's community. And Sally had a similar knack that Joseph did. And so sometimes she feels kind of resentful that she got looked over when she was also a treasure digger and look into seer stones and find cool stuff. So this, I'll just jump in. As Sally Chase held the tray of water, her hands were shaking so much in anger that she struggled not to drop the whole thing, pitcher, cups, and all. As she approached the sound of clinking shovels and falling earth, all the old resentments began to spin in her mind once again. As she approached the growing hole in the Chase property and saw Joseph and Alvin Smith's sweating heads peeking up above it into view, her brother Willard's as well, Sally wondered whether she would be able to mask her complaints or whether she truly wanted to. "Thank you, Miss Chase," said Alvin politely as he climbed out of the hole and took the shaking water that was being offered him. "Thank you, Sally," said Joseph, echoing his big brother. Sally nodded curtly to both of them. Then both the Smith brothers sat on a large mound of dirt and drank deeply, thirsty from their labor. Sally turned her heel, glad to be free of her service to them, and started walking back until she heard her brother's voice call to her, "Sally!" Sally stopped, but did not deign to turn around. Willard dashed to her, his face stern when he came to her view. "We haven't found anything," he stated accusingly. "I told you what I saw. It's there somewhere. You promised me treasure, and you promised it would just be the two of us." "Hush." Willard looked back at Alvin and Joseph, but they weren't paying him and Sally any mind. "It is just the two of us. I haven't told them a thing about what we're doing. And when you do find something, what are you going to tell them then? They won't want to share?" At this, Willard was simply quiet. "See, you don't think ahead," Sally whispered harshly. "And why did you have to hire the Smiths of all people? You know how I felt after Joe was preferred over me." "Look, it would have been taken me the whole eternity to dig a hole like that by myself. Whatever else can be said of the Smiths, they're hard workers." "I find it a personal insult, Willard." "Then you're a damn fool." "Why?" "What language coming from a Methodist class minister? Stop your foolishness and whining. If anyone has reason to be upset, it's me. You said I would find treasure, and there hasn't been a damn thing." "I said you would find something valuable, and not a damn thing. You complain about the Smiths, but at least they're delivering the services promised. You, on the other hand, something is there." Sally was upset. She couldn't quite grasp the words she wanted to use to assure her brother that she was indeed useful in this endeavor. "I couldn't get a good look at it, but it felt important." "Felt? We're doing all this work based on a feeling?" Suddenly the Chase's argument was interrupted by Alvin's sober and even-keeled voice. "We are ready to get back to work when you are, Mr. Chase." "I'll be right there." Willard called out to Alvin before turning back to Sally. "Look, Sally, you're my sister. You'll always be blood to me. But how can I trust you to have these abilities you claim if you don't follow through? I'll be losing money paying those boys if I don't." "You've got to trust me, Willard. You'll find something." Unable to withstand the pressure of her brother's penetrating stare, Sally turned her burning face away from him and resumed her walk back towards the house. Willard, trying to contain his frustration, turned back to the Smith boys. He drank down his glass of water, filled it again, down that too, and then took up a shovel and jumped into the hole. Let's be at it then, boys. Before Alvin and young Joseph were able to grab their shovels and jump back in, Willard looked down and something caught his eye. It was there, poking out of the earth, a shining but dark surface. Seeing Willard stop and stare, Alvin and Joseph paused, crouching down to peer at it as well. Willard reached his hand into the dirt, the grains of dark earth falling off the object as Willard picked it up. Well, we may have found something after all, Willard said, a little mystified. Found something? Alvin said, suspicious. I thought you said we were digging a well. We are, Willard said in half-truth. But look at this. It was a stone, a very unique-looking stone. It was about the size of an egg, but not the same shape. The stone was dark, almost black, with a siliceous quality to it. Within the black silica, there were white stripes, which shone like quartz. Come here, Joe. You have a knack for these things. Tell me what you think, Willard said, waving Joseph into the pit. Joseph immediately jumped in, anxious to take a look at the stone, but Alvin was nervous for his brother. Willard, you didn't tell us we were engaging in treasure digging, Alvin said, glancing apprehensively at his younger brother, who was inspecting the stone with bright eyes and an open mouth. No need to worry yourself, Alvin, Willard said a little too casually. It's nothing but a rock. It's more than a rock, Joseph said confidently. Mr. Chase, can I see your hat? Willard climbed out of the hole, grabbed his hat, and handed it to Joseph. The young seer then put the stone in the hat and looked in. Joseph, really? Willard interrupted Alvin with a raised finger. There was a hushed silence, almost too long of a silence. Willard almost gave it into a disappointment before Joseph suddenly exclaimed, Whoa! What is it? What did you see? Willard asked eagerly. I see a hill. There's a room in the hill, but also somewhere else, a box. Is that cement? No, wait. It's moving away. I can't see it anymore. But there's something there. I can't tell where, but this is marvelous. I can see so much. That's enough. Alvin climbed into the hole and took the hat away from the startled Joseph. He handed the hat with stone still in it back to Willard. Alvin then grabbed a shovel and handed that to Joseph. Joseph looked up at his brother, not able to mask the hurt in his eyes, but then took the shovel and started digging. When Willard returned home that night, Sally unsurprisingly had her face in a hat. When Willard closed the door behind him, she looked up. How was the day with your brothers in arms? Find anything? Willard hesitated, then said to his sister, no. But we did reach water, so it wasn't a complete waste. Sally put her face back into the hat to hide her tears and frustration. Willard went into his room, closed the door, and sat at the chair by his window, the moonlight giving off a bright light. He took the stone out of his pocket and looked at it. He didn't know why he lied to Sally. Perhaps he wasn't sure about the stone yet. His rational side, saw nothing but a unique, pretty rock. A part of him wanted to believe, wanted to think that when Joseph put his face in that hat, that he really did see those mysterious and tantalizing images. He wanted to believe that despite all of the Enlightenment thinkers that have been raping and robbing religion of its magic for over 100 years, perhaps there was still some mystery and miracle to it after all. In his work for the Methodist Church, Willard saw the tension in lots of people. That desire to believe in the remarkable and the unexplainable, juxtaposed against the unrelenting logic that wanted to see the world in its truest light. Even if that light was cruel in bending us back to the square angles that held up the despairing facts, those sharp angles upon which faith was skewered. Willard had seen that war was within every soul, more or less. Even the devout who just pushed back their doubts on a high shelf, but never really eradicated them. Even in the hardest skeptic who tried to drown the fear that it was he himself that was truly in the dark. That was he who had missed something along the way, only to have that fear rise again out of the watery depths, unexpected. Could a young boy really put an odd rock in a stove-top hat and expect to see a vision that led him to gold? Were Willard's efforts in the Methodist Church made only in the desperate chance to synthesize with the society around him, to somehow find a way of fitting in and lining up? Was he circling with the rest of them around a dead body that they kept droning on about, repeating how it was going to come back alive again? Willard took off his hat and stared at it, transfixed by the dark abyss its hole created, mesmerized by the idea that a stone could shine within it. He placed the hat on the table and held the stone in his hand for a moment. He then dropped the stone within the hat and stared for a long time, hypnotized by the apparatus, the machine. For a moment, he imagined himself bending over the hat and staring into its deep space, beholding the glories the stone may show him. But he never did.
Thank you, Mohammed. Now, how far does the story take Joseph? All the way to the first vision? Beyond? How far does it go?
It goes to the first vision and also to when Angel Moroni first comes to him, basically, and he tells his family.
And are you going to do
part
more?
of the series? We'll see how far I get into the series, but how far into history I go. So
You think at least one more?
what's that?
So there'll be at least one more volume coming up?
I hope so. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Well, thank you to everybody. It's so great to hear from these young adult and middle grade novelists, the great narrative voice that everybody has. There's so much of the writing that's going on in our community right now is going on in these genres, and you can see the great talent that's there. James, you want to wrap us up, or?
Yeah, just thanks so much to everyone, and have a good night. And we really appreciate you sharing with us.